How are you?
I would like to welcome everyone to the Clackamas County Commission Policy Session on the future of the courthouse on this April 21st, 2021. First, I would like to acknowledge some special guests in the room today. We have presiding Clackamas County Judge Kathleen Steele. My hat's off to you. And we have our District Attorney John Wentworth present. Thank you very much for that. Gary, go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So today, Commissioners, you are going to have an update on the proposed new county courthouse project update. Our main presenters today will be Gary Barth, who is Courthouse Project Manager based in County Administration, and Elizabeth Comfort, our County Finance Director, as well as several consultants who have been working with us on the proposed public-private partnership. Gary will do introductions in just a moment with his team. I would like to kick it off, Commissioners. So the county courthouse has been in the county's Red Soils Master Campus Plan since 1998. So 22 years. Your predecessors, prior boards of commissioners, have talked about the need for a new county courthouse. Counties are required by law to provide facilities for circuit courts. So that is a function of county government. We're responsible for a building and maintaining that building, while the employees are state employees of the state courts, of course, circuit courts, of course. I'm just going to jump in. Commissioners, you can afford a new county courthouse without raising taxes, but the question is that a priority for you at this point in time? And if so, then you will have to make decisions on how you would fund that with other funding streams within the county. You'll hear more about that later. I just feel the need to open with that line. With that, Chair Smith, would you like any comments before we begin?
Yeah, I just have a few comments. There was a decision that came down yesterday that has impacted America nationwide. I just want to say it just shows that our justice system has provided accountability when it's needed, and we here at Clackamas County will continue our good work along those lines for justice, public safety, and the preservation of freedom. And with that in mind, I'd like to say, Commissioners, I've been working with Gary and Gary closely on this courthouse presentation and whether we think we can do it or not. And so with that in mind, I'm going to ask the commissioners, I'm going to be extremely strict in our presentation today because we have a lot of material to get through in 2 hours. It's very complicated. After each of the building block sections, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 building block sections, commissioners will be allowed to ask questions. I'm asking you, please, in advance, only ask questions regarding to that particular building block. If you have a question at financing and we're at courthouse facility needs, that will be inappropriate. I hope you would wait for that question later, and I will try to help us monitor through that. I understand, you know, we're all intelligent, inquisitive commissioners, and we want our answers right now. But we decided, the three of us, that the presentation would work the best that way. So we have 4 building blocks. I see that there's a light on, whoever that is. Who is that? Fisher, please be brief.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Smith. I wanted to appreciate you starting off this particular session with comments about the verdict yesterday, which is a national event of significance. And I see that we have our district attorney in the room, we have our chief justice, and we do not have our sheriff. But yesterday when the verdict came down, her statement that was on Twitter was, I thought, very impactful, and I just would like to share it with us because she's very much
Please
a
be
part
brief.
of this.
Please be
very
brief.
Short statement. Statement on today's conviction in the murder of George Floyd. Today's verdict confirms we have a justice system that will hold law enforcement officers accountable for their actions. No one is above the law, that many good men and women who wear their badges with honor, integrity, and compassion stand with our communities with an ache in our hearts and a deep understanding that words are not enough. As your sheriff, I'm committed to the strengthening relationships with the communities we serve through training, transparency, and accountability.
Thank you. That was quite timely and well read. Thank you, Commissioner Fisher.
I appreciate the opportunity.
You betcha.
It sets the tone for the important work we have to do today.
We are talking about justice. Gary Barth, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. I greatly appreciate this opportunity to
bring you an update on this very important project. We have a lot of information to share with you today. I think you'll find it very, very informative. County Administrator Gary Schmidt just kind of summarized some of the concurrence items I think we have in agreement. So I'm not going to restate those. I'm going to move on. I also want to acknowledge that for all of our presenters today, that the board has a luncheon at noon. So we're going to try to wrap up even a little before noon to give you time to.
Thank you very much for that, Gary.
So everybody be mindful. I'm going to keep a tight watch on our presenters as well. Public-private partnership is kind of a fundamental kind of piece of this transaction we're presenting to you today. In fiscal year 1920, a value for money analysis, and it's a fairly standard analysis of public infrastructure projects. Value for money analysis was prepared for the board. The VFM looked at 5 alternative approaches to designing, building, financing, operating, and maintaining a new courthouse. Based on the analysis, the recommended approach was a P3 partnership. The board concurred, and we've kind of been on that direction since. In July of last year, the board was directed staff to complete our Phase 1 planning effort. That Phase 1 planning effort is a jointly funded effort between the county and the state to prepare us for a procurement for a new county courthouse. So our deliverable under that Phase 1 planning agreement with the state is a procurement package. That agreement was extended for 1 year. It expires on July 1, which is why we've scheduled a May 4th study session for you to present the final results of that packet. Today, because of the amount of information involved, we thought it would be very good to show you 3 critical components of that packet so you can have an in-depth kind of conversation, ask your questions, so you'll feel well-versed and have contextual reference when we go into the May 4th policy session. So with that pre-planning, we hired 3 consulting firms. They're all on the call today. 2 of them will be presenting today. They are WT Partnerships. They did all the technical analysis. They'll be our first presenter. Rebel, which is a financial and transactional consulting firm who's been working with county finance on our whole affordability and payment structure. And Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood, which is a legal firm specializing in P3 procurement partnerships. So the procurement package that we've been working on since last fall with the consultant team and the technical advisory team of county staff and state staff. So we've had 30-plus folks plus consultants involved in this project. We put together what we're preparing is a facility technical requirement. What building do we need? High-level cost estimate of that building, a financing plan, a draft board resolution authorizing a P3 procurement, should you approve, a draft term sheet for the P3 project agreement, and a draft request for qualifications to go to the market, should you approve advancing. All of that work has been in process. Significant amounts of it are complete. And today we're going to walk you through 3 of those components: facility needs, cost, and financing. So with that, I will turn to our first presenter, WT Partnerships, Tom Ness. And Tom, I'm trusting that you're all, I don't have access to the Zoom, so I'm trusting they're all there.
It worked. Great. Thank you, Gary. My name is Tom Ness, and I lead WT Partnerships US P3 practice. I am joined today by my colleagues, Jose Davila, who is the technical project manager on the project, as well as Steve Kelly, who leads our national U.S. construction cost estimating practice. Jose and Steve today will talk about the process it took to determine the size, as Gary said, and estimated cost of the new courthouse. But first, I want to thank the board for inviting us today to this study session. We are very much looking forward to presenting our findings and answering any questions that you might have. I would also like to thank the county and state staff for all of their hard work over the last several months. We understand that they have full-time jobs, but they also made time for us, and it made our job a lot easier, and we thank them very much for that. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jose Davila to talk a little bit about the building size. Jose?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Davila. I am a senior advisor with WT Partnership. Thank you to the board for having us here today. I'm going to run quickly through the work that we have done to date. Essentially, back in 2019, the county requested the help of the National Center for State Courts, the NCSC, to develop a courthouse program for the new Clackamas Courthouse, which is the summary of which you are seeing on screen here. The program, very quickly, is essentially a tabulation of the spaces, the areas and rooms that the courthouse will require for its proper operation and for the staff to carry out its functions properly. And it also sets the minimum square footage for each room and consequently for the entire courthouse. Our mission, WT, was retained to essentially meet with the stakeholders and confirm that each space in that program was the space required and validate that program, which we did. We met with about 12 stakeholder groups at the Oregon Judicial District, as well as the county, including the judges, courthouse management and administrative staff, the civil sheriff's office, the DA's office, and a few others. So we gather all the input and feedback from these stakeholder groups, and we ended up validating the program. The existing courthouse currently has, I think, 11 courtrooms, and the current, considering the current and projected needs, the new courthouse will need 14 courtrooms to address current needs, and then 2 additional courtrooms for a total of 16 to address the needs over the next few decades. With that, we also confirmed the capital cost for the courthouse, which my colleague Steve Kelly will be talking a little bit about that a little bit later. Then we proceeded to develop the adjacency diagrams for the courthouse, and basically the adjacencies, the functional adjacencies for the courthouse. The goal of this exercise is to ensure the operational efficiency of the courthouse and the physical safety of the staff, the public, and everyone attending the courthouse. This basically dictates which rooms and which departments are going to be adjacent to each other so that the work can be carried out efficiently. With that, we also developed 3 separate and distinct circulation areas within the courthouse, one for the public, one for the staff, and another one for the in-custody persons, as they are escorted by the sheriff's office as well. Next, we worked on the room data sheets. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the room data sheets essentially include a layout of what the room within the courthouse should be. Case in point here, the example that we have on the screen is a diagram for a proposed layout for a courtroom. And it also sets the finishes, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, the minimum required essentially for each room. The whole point of these exercises of this process that we've been working on is to develop the performance specifications for the courthouse. I wanna make clear at this point that we, WT, and our leading architects are not designing the courthouse at this point. We are just setting up and developing the requirements for design, construction, and then also the long-term operations and maintenance, facilities management, that the future contractor and designer and facilities manager will have to abide by to, again, design, construct, and operate that courthouse. With that, that is essentially our mission here. And before I pass it on to Mr. Kelly, I would like to ask if there are any questions in regards to the process.
Gary,
This is
has
a
he
summary
finished his
of the,
presentation?
yeah.
Gary has,
Yes, that concludes the technical part of the presentation, so we can open it up for board questions now
board
on
questions.
the building
I'll
requirement.
start with a quick one. What is a 35% grossing factor on your square footage?
The 35% grossing factor is basically we set the requirement for the net square footage, which is the usable area within a particular room or area within the courthouse. And the grossing factor is essentially a multiplier to add a nominal amount for that area, which is going to be basically covered by the wall partitions, which is not usable. Things where areas, for example, where there are going to be certain embedded furniture that is not movable and things like that. So that is essentially the difference between gross square footage and net square footage.
So the net square footage is 191,595, but the gross square footage is 260,000. Is that,
That's correct.
am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Am I understanding that great? Okay.
That's correct.
And
Yeah.
then because of the grossing factor, it takes down our net square footage of usable rooms, right?
Yeah. And if I could add to that, please, it also includes hallways, stairways, vertical circulation. It's everything.
Can you speak
essentially
up,
that is
sir?
in the
I
room.
can't, I'm having trouble hearing. Just a moment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're going to turn up the volume in our room here. Okay, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, and that is an estimate based on industry standard. And like Jose said, it's the walls, it's the unusable space, really. It's stairwells, it's, the inside of elevators. It's everything essentially that is in a room. And that is used in that calculation. So just to add a little more clarity to Jose's point.
Well, would that include hallways and elevators and that type of stuff? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Go ahead. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Scholl?
Yes. Of all the courthouses built under the NCSC program, are there examples of a design, engineering, innovation, and efficiency that's already been done that we could utilize to bring down some of our design costs?
Excellent question, Tom. I'll take this one first, then you can add anything. We both had Sarah Architects do a programming design, then we had National Center for States Courts, which specializes just in courthouse facilities. They did they didn't design a new building for us, they did the similar kind of space programming effort. The benefit you get with the P3 is you create a competitive process where courthouse design firms partnering with contractors and building operators compete on innovative designs to bring in the best value project at the lowest cost in order to win the project. So our expectation is we'll see all the best practices in courthouse design, as well as maybe some advancing best practices when we go through the procurement process.
Okay.
Tom, anything you want to add?
No, just echoing what you said, Gary. I mean, this is essentially a baseline, but I have been doing P3s for about 20 years in my career, 19. And as Gary said, it's that competitive tension and innovation amongst the design and construction teams and the consortiums that are really going to bring, the value to this process. And they could certainly propose something that's more efficient. It could have a different grossing factor. And we're expecting that. And certainly in the procurement process that we're laying out with the legal team and the financial team, we will focus on that innovation and really tapping into that by meeting with these folks during the procurement process to drive that. So that's a great question. Thank you.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so on this competitive nature, this discussion we're having, how is that really different than either conventional construction or CMGC where a value engineering process is done by, experts in the field related to whatever you're building? How is value engineering different than that? I mean, in the sense that you don't get, for example, we had a water treatment facility that that we took on in a prior role. It was a $100 million project at this point in time, and after value engineering, it was brought down to about $60 million. We saved $40 million in design and process in that, and the net result was a considerable savings. So how is this different?
Yeah, the primary difference here is when you do a traditional all-public approach, using a design bid build or progressive design build, is you put out a request for proposal for a single architectural firm, and you select one firm based on qualifications. And then you do the same with the contractor to build it. And then those two firms do that value engineering effort. In a P3, you've got 3 teams doing value engineering efforts, competing. And so they're all forcing in a competitive tension. They're all doing the value engineering and the innovative design. So you get the best of 3 approaches as opposed to a singular.
Right, but the motivations are different. I want to point that out. So when you bring in people that are not associated with the project, okay, you bring in engineers and experts that are not attached. They don't have any gain. They don't have any benefit. They're there and hired to do the value engineering independently without any bias, any future influence or anything else. They're just there to get the best design, okay, to meet all those needs. It sounds to me in this P3 environment, it's about really how to do similarly the same thing, but they all have a vested interest, right? So there's, my concern is that, there might be a quality issue or so forth that an independent group doing the value engineering would not have.
For that, I am deferring to our P3 subject matter experts. So Tom, you want to address that? Or somebody from your team?
I'm sorry, I got to turn myself back on. Jose, jump in if you need to. I hear your point, sir, and I think there are similar to Gary's point, though, as well. They're all competing to the win, so they're going to do everything they can internally to value engineer it to drive the cost down so they win the project. And with respect to quality, we are working extremely hard through the performance specifications, the design and construction specifications, as well as the operating and maintenance specifications, to ensure that you have a quality building, a high quality building that will perform at a very high level for many years to come. These are 30-year contracts, right? And we are going to ensure that through the performance standards that they meet the requirements of the project. And to the extent that they don't, and maybe Marcel will address this later, there is a very robust penalty regime where they will be hit hard with any kind of quality or latent defects they have on the facility. And, again, this building is going to be set up where when you take it back over, you will always own this building, I want to be clear, but when you take it back over after 30 years, we will ensure that the building that is returned to you is in excellent, condition to last, the constituents in the county for many years to come. This is a long-term game here with this building. So we really believe, and having seen it in countless, technical meetings with bidders throughout the years, that they're going to do everything possible to drive value engineering and cost savings so that they can win the project.
Well, I'll just close with this, and I appreciate that. I said this before to last year, I believe, or a year and a half ago, that, the motivation to make this building last 30 to 35 years before it's transferred by the private owner is substantially different than us inheriting the building and making sure it lives another 30 to 40, 50 years beyond that point. So our life expectancy and our desires are beyond the 35-year period when we inherit it. So how do we ensure from that period of time forward, after the 30 years, when we get the building back, or 35 years, that we have that longevity built in? And
Yeah,
that's
and
where
just
the
to
value engineering
clarify, we are building a building that will last decades. We tend to build these things about every 100 years, it appears, on courthouses for their time frame. It's just that the project agreement, where we'll be repaying the capital charge to the private entity, is an agreement that lasts 30 years. And we'll just ensure that the standard maintenance schedule is adhered to, so at the end of the 30-year project agreement, there's no deferred maintenance. That building is still in fantastic condition. It doesn't mean it's only got a life of 30 years. The project agreement has a life of 30 years. The building has a life of 70, 80. Our current building was built in 1936, so apparently it had a life of over 100 years. So we're designing a building for the long term. It's just that the 30-year is tied to the project agreement with the project company.
I was speaking to the materials particularly.
Yep, thank you. Well, a vested interest in value engineering sounds like a good thing to me. Gary, any other commissioners? I see nothing. I think we can continue on our presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Our next presentation is with the Rebel Group, or no, I'm sorry. WT has one final, a very important presentation regarding the cost. And Tom had mentioned Steve Kelly before. Tom, you want to take it over?
Again, if we could turn on Steve so he can present the cost findings.
Yeah, I seem to be unmuted, and it looks like you're about to see my fantastic face in a second too. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Steve Kelly. I'm a cost estimator by trade, and I've been here in the Pacific Northwest for the past 22 years. I've been involved in the process to provide cost advice to the team who are providing the size, shape, form, quality expectations of the project for you. As Jose already alluded to, we, as part of the technical team, include an architect planner on our side, and it's been their charge to develop the program which describes the size and shape of the building. And it's been my charge to take that information, and as they're developing the overall size of the building, they're talking about the adjacencies between the spaces to each other, and providing me with room data sheets which describe the potential content of each of the rooms that they are programming. Our cost modeling efforts have been paralleling or mirroring their efforts. As they develop more information which is usable to us, I start to refine our, I want to emphasize the point that it's a cost model as opposed to a cost estimate. The cost model is based on a great deal of experiential information, as well as that which is developed unique for this particular project. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is the cost model response to the program that was developed by our architects, and the design, the room data sheets they developed, as well as what we call a stacking diagram, which is essentially the vertical arrangement of spaces within the potential building. So what I've been able to do with the information that the designers generate is to envisage, if you like, a three-dimensional model of the project. And using that model and our experience, as well as some advice about quality and some system expectations for the project, its longevity, quality, so on, I've been able to populate a sort of cost armature with a list of items that we think are appropriate for a building of this type, and then to assign unit rates, costs to each one of these items to develop what you see here in front of you, which is a summary of the project broken down into 3 or 4 constituent parts. So we have the courthouse itself, we have the basement, which will function for judges' parking, sheriff activities, that sort of thing. Then we have the district attorney's office, which is which occupies, I think, 3 of the 5 above ground spaces. And then obviously to round out the project, we're creating a site-based environment for the building to sit. Once we get to that total building and site work, we then apply what we call a list of markups or project costs to the construction cost. The 156 million there is loosely translated as the amount of the contract that you would sign with a contractor. And then there are other administrative charges and fees associated with developing any project. And then you see we get down to a recommended budget for this project of just under $200 million. Although I describe this as a cost modeling process, I don't want to give you the impression that we just threw this together and used the last one, if you like, that we had developed. It's been a fairly iterative process. I mean, even going back to April of 2019, when the county commissioned the original study and the original cost model that was developed to support that study, we've been advancing the cause beyond where that study left off. And Jose's team has been developing technical requirements that I can then apply to an updated, more refined, let's say, cost model that gives us a little bit more detail in the backup and therefore a little bit more visibility for our team to review our cost information and make sure that any assumptions that we've been making throughout this process are in line with the quality expectations and the programmatic expectations that the technical team is coming up with. It's been a great process. I've been able to work very closely with some great designers and planners. I've been able to work very closely with Gary, who's been a great guide, mentor, and leader for our team. And then I'm getting to see the process essentially where we, as the cost estimators, come to a construction cost total and then hand it off to someone like Marcel with Rebel to see how that turns into a financial model. And I'm getting a much better view of the, if you like, the beginning, the genesis of the project, and then the ultimate development of the project. And I want to give you guys some assurance that we're doing this in as scientific a method as is possible, with as much experience as we can bring to bear, in the absence of an absolute design, let's say. So I'm happy to take questions from the commissioners. I'm happy to discuss what we've done to date and how we feel about this cost model and the process that has brought us to this point.
Christine, can you leave that graph up? Yeah, I'm going to open it up. Yes, Gary?
Chair, can I add a couple of comments to Steve's presentation? You'll note that we have two items below the line, Loop Road and surface parking.
Yes, I noticed
We brought
that.
those below the line because those will be determined by City of Oregon City's land use permitting requirements. And we're not sure exactly what that cost will be, what those requirements will be, or how much of those will be triggered by the courthouse only and then able to be contributed 50% cost to by the state, or if it's going to be more of a campus requirement that doesn't qualify for
Or
the
even if
state.
we'll be allowed to have a gravel parking lot, they'll probably make us pave it.
Yeah, I think we're
with
saying
the
gravel.
rainwater- With a rainwater runoff system underneath. 'Cause
Right,
I
it
had
just
to do
depends
that
on how
a
temporary it
Project
is.
that I built once. Thank you, Gary. I have a couple questions. The projected cost is coming in at $773 per square foot on the last graph that we saw. How does that cost compare to the courthouses built in Multnomah County and Jefferson County? Keeping in mind, we own our own land. I don't know if they can answer that for me today, but I do need the answer to that question.
And we did look at all those comps, the local courthouses, as well as what Lane County was projecting in their budget request to the state, as well as other courthouse projects that have been completed throughout the country. So I don't know, Tom or Jose or Steve, you want to address that now, or would it be best to respond back in writing to the board?
I would like to put that together and respond in writing to the board, just to make sure that we have all the correct information. But we'll get that to the board very quickly.
But
Yes,
we
I
do
would
have those
appreciate
comps.
that. Any other? Commissioner Schrader?
Just a quick question, Gary. Was Jefferson County a remodel or a new build? Do you know?
Was Jefferson County what? I'm sorry.
Was it a remodel of an existing structure or a new
It's,
build?
it's a new building.
It's a new
They
build.
built a new city hall and a new courthouse. It's a 4-courtroom courthouse, 2 stories, I believe, and 15 million.
Yeah, and so from my perspective, that is really more of a rural situation. We're really more aligned with population growth with Multnomah. So,
The problem is, there are really only 2 new courthouses that have been
Right.
completed in Oregon, and it's our only comparables that we have. But I'd just be curious on that.
And Lane County was a pretty good one too, because they
Yeah, but
did
they
pretty
haven't- yeah, they
extensive
haven't-
analysis.
Yeah, well, if you want to provide the information for Lane, that's okay too. Commissioner Savas?
I just turned my light off. I just found my answer.
Okay, thank you. Who's in the queue? Commissioner Fisher? Fisher, please continue.
Thank you. I really appreciate this cost model validation graph. It's really nice to see things broken out this way. But I'm curious, I know that with site development, there was some needs to move some things around up here on Red Soils campus, and I just want to confirm that those costs are separate than what is projected here?
Yeah, we have two buildings on the site, behavioral health and the Stewart, Hilltop and Stewart building, modulars. They're not worth relocating, moving physically because of their construction. So those functions will need to be relocated to a new location. The cost of demoing those buildings once vacant is included in the costs.
Oh,
But the
okay.
cost of them finding new space is an H3S responsibility.
Oh, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions on this? I assume that these graphs will be given to the commissioners for us to look at on all these presentations after we finish.
Should be in your packet.
Yep.
Yeah,
Should be in your packet.
thank you very much. Go ahead. Gary, go ahead with the, I don't see any more comments, so I guess we're ahead of schedule.
We're doing well.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
So now you've heard about the facility need and the estimated cost. The only thing I might add, just to close out the costs, is Steve, could you quickly talk about the categories of cost estimates, 1 to 5, and where you think this one is?
Yeah, we essentially respond to the American Association of Cost Engineers, and they grade or rate cost estimates. Now, to be clear, and Gary and I had this discussion earlier on, to be clear, when we talk about levels of estimating quality or accuracy, we're not talking about how much detail someone like me can develop with the available design information. We're talking about how much design information was available from which to develop a cost model. It's, I make that distinction because someone as long in the tooth as me can probably create a 1,500 or 2,500 line item estimate off of a sketch on the back of a cigarette packet. But the quality of the available design information, and therefore the number of assumptions that are required to create that level of detail, is really what we're talking about here. And so we're in the lowest, highest, I'm not sure how you'd like to describe it, but we're at the lowest level of detail. We're around, or perhaps not absolutely zero information, because as I just described, our design consultant, our technical team have weighed in with quite a bit of information from which I can use a platform to develop more detail. But we're in the sort of level 4 to 5 cost estimating level of accuracy, quality sort of thing. And I've done as much as I can to create as many items as possible so that the team can see what assumptions we've made and correct them if necessary. But it's, you know, we're talking about something that is, I don't want to give the idea of, I think Marcel, who'll speak later on, used the term false precision. Just because we've created a lot of items and priced them all doesn't mean that we know exactly how much it's going to cost, but we do have a lot of confidence in the total that we've reached, and we present that to you with confidence because we've shaken out a lot of assumptions that may be made in isolation before among our team and with our collaborators.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to present that up to the board because it is a high level. Once we get into the procurement and the design competition, the value engineering that Commissioner Savas referred to, the costs are going to get much more precise, and before you ever actually enter into a project agreement, you will have a guaranteed maximum price that is very, very precise. So with that, I will turn it over now to our consultant colleagues at Rebel. And their lead is Marcel Ham. So Marcel will be kicking off, and he's got a team of folks that have also been participating with us on this. Marcel?
Thanks, Jerry, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for the opportunity to present to you today. My name is Marcel Ham. I'm with Rebel. Rebel is a financial and transaction advisory firm. We specialize in infrastructure finance projects, and we work on innovative finance and P3 projects across the globe and across the nation. We were also the advisors on the Howard County Courthouse P3 and the Miami-Dade Courthouse P3. In the past few months, we've worked with Elizabeth Comfort and her team on developing the financial analysis and the risk analysis. And that's basically taking the cost estimates that Steve just presented and turning them into what we expect to be the long-term obligations under a P3 agreement. And that's what we'd like to present to you today. But before going into the numbers, we would like to also take the opportunity to briefly refresh you on why the board decided to pursue a P3 in the first place, and also how that is different from a conventional delivery of the project. So on my first slide, I'm showing two schematics, one for conventional delivery and one for P3 delivery. And as you can see, is under conventional delivery, I think we pretty much know how this works. The county is very familiar with the model. The county would enter into a design agreement with a design contractor and a construction contract, and also a maintenance contract. Separate agreements, most likely on the maintenance side, we would expect to see several agreements in parallel, but also shorter term agreements. So there would be many agreements that the county would enter into. And all those project costs of design and construction would be financed through the issuance of a full faith and credit bond, most likely, if not GO. The county would pay the contractors on a pay-as-you-go basis. So whenever they would perform, they would get paid. Under P3 delivery, the county enters into a single contract with the P3 partner. And the P3 partner becomes responsible for delivering the courthouse, not only completing it in the first place, but also delivering it according to the standards for the next 30 years. And in order to do so, the P3 partner enters into design-build agreements and agreements with the facility manager, but also attracts the financing to make that happen, because the P3 partner only gets paid after completing the building. And in the structure that we have developed for this project, the payment would come in two forms. One as a milestone payment based on the state funding that is available for the project. And the other portion would be an availability payment, basically a P3 payment that is performance-based. And that would be paid basically every month to the P3 partner, to the extent the P3 partner performs. If they don't perform, there would be deductions. So that's how the two models are different. Then going into why the county expected that to deliver a better deal, a better bang for its buck. That's really a few key items. One of which is there's incentives in the P3 procurement and in the P3 contract that will lead to design and construction cost savings and lifecycle cost savings. And we're actually seeing that in real life projects as well. So the bidders will come, because they want to win, as we just discussed, will come up with creative solutions, whether it's in the choice of materials or in the design, to save not only design and construction costs, but also lifecycle costs. And I actually want to get back to one point that Commissioner Savas just made is how is this different from the value engineering under CMGC, for example, or construction manager at risk? I think the main difference is under the P3, we are asking the project, the P3 partner to take responsibility for the project for the next 30 years, not just for the construction itself. So now they do not only become responsible for the construction, but also the operation. And so if there's any issues in maintenance of certain materials, in equipment breaking down, anything, they're going to be responsible. So I think that is why we're expecting that there's going to be life cycle cost savings here as well, which is different from CMGC. Another key element that we discussed was long-term performance incentives. So as we just discussed, there's going to be a performance-based payment. And if the P3 partner is performing, they get paid. If they are not performing, if they do not deliver availability of the courthouse according to the technical standards, they won't get paid. There will be deductions. There will be financial penalties. And so for that reason, we have seen in other projects that leads to generally a better performance. And all of this leads to more risk transfer, of course, to the private partner, because where under the conventional model, the county would retain risks associated with the delay, cost overruns, performance, any maintenance issues, maybe interface issues between subcontractors. Now that is all being transferred to the P3 partner. And that creates certainty for the county. It creates certainty on the cost side, and it creates certainty on the completion date side. And actually, to be honest, this is actually, I think this is the number one issue or actually consideration for example, Howard County, Maryland, to go with a P3 approach. The Spending Affordability Advisory Committee there recommended a P3 because they said this creates a fiscally responsible solution for a project that is so big and complex for the county. So that's what it creates. So the flip side of that is also that the P3 model is sometimes seen as less flexible. So we're building in a lot of certainty regarding cost and performance, but it also means that that we are basically entering into an agreement for 30 years. Now, that doesn't mean that there's no way to make changes, because the P3 agreement that we will probably discuss in the next meeting will have provisions for making changes. So there will always be mechanisms to change any requirements or scope or anything, even ultimately the right to terminate the agreement should the county want to do so. So those were really the main considerations for the county to pursue a P3. And I want to zoom into the risk aspect a little bit, because we were just discussing under the P3 delivery, many more of the risks will be either shared with the private partner or transferred to the private partners. Now, in the earlier stages, the risk, for example, associated with the permitting or site conditions, those risks cannot be fully transferred to the private partner. However, they can be shared with the private partner, which means that they now have an interest to also manage those risks. Then basically all the risks associated with design and construction, and then even more so maintenance and operations are being transferred to the private developer, with a few exceptions that are specified in the P3 agreement. Moving on to the next slide, I think it's even clearer compared to conventional delivery, where the county retains long-term performance and coordination risks, working with multiple subcontractors, but also simply holding the responsibility for the performance of the courthouse. Those risks are now being transferred to the P3 developer. Now, this is just a very quick overview of the risks. In the meantime, we've worked together with a county and state team to develop a more comprehensive risk assessment. We've identified well over 100 risks, and we thought about how to allocate them. And so those risks then in turn inform the valuation, the financial analysis, but also the project agreements. Okay, so now we finally get to the numbers. On the next slide, we're showing you basically the cash flows for both conventional delivery and P3 delivery. And I want to highlight a few things that you're seeing on this slide. The first one is under both models, the conventional delivery and the P3 delivery, we're seeing upfront cost in the early years. So basically starting in fiscal year 2021 through 2025, when the courthouse is currently expected to be completed. The transaction cost under basically the cost associated with the preparation and procurement will be a little higher under P3 delivery. However, at the same time, you're seeing higher cash flows under conventional delivery, and the main reason is that the debt service, the turquoise or green bar that you're seeing, starts earlier under conventional delivery. So the county is expected to issue bonds for design and then for construction. And then debt service payments would start as early as 2022 and forward. Under the P3 delivery, the equivalent of the debt service, the capital charge, will only start, and the entire payment to the P3 partner will only start after completing the building, which is in 2025. So that's the main difference. I just mentioned debt service. So the turquoise bar under conventional delivery is debt service. The P3 equivalent is P3 capital cost. I'm saying equivalent, but at the same time, it's apples and oranges, because the P3 capital cost is not just the cost of financing. It also includes a risk premium. Financiers and investors will price the risk that they're accepting. All the risks that we were just discussing associated with the long-term performance of the courthouse, the interface risk, coordination risk between subcontractors, all the cost overrun risks, all those risks will eventually, they will need to be priced, and those are priced in the cost of capital, which is, to some extent, it's apples and oranges, because those risks are obviously not priced in a full faith and credit bond. The light blue bars are the O&M cost, and they're fairly similar. We're expecting some efficiencies under P3 delivery, as we just discussed, but they should be fairly similar under the two models. And then finally, we're seeing the gray bars, which is the expected value of the county risk. So under both models, the county will retain will retain risks. But of course, under the conventional delivery, the county will retain many more risks. So one could, of course, argue that those risk values are not necessarily cash flows, and that's right. So they are not cash flows. They will turn into cash flows the moment the cost overrun happens, the moment the equipment breaks down, the moment there is unexpected maintenance or delays. So whereas the gray bar is not necessarily like an upfront committed cash out under conventional delivery, it is our best educated guesstimate of what the expected value of those risks is. It's not the maximum value, it's the expected value. So meaning it could also be higher. And that's why it's relevant to consider those as well in the comparison between a conventional and P3 delivery. Maybe I finished the final slide, and then maybe Elizabeth, if there's anything you want to add, please feel free to chime in. The final slide is on the P3 payments themselves. So we just saw a P3 payment for the capital cost and a P3 payment for O&M cost. And I want to say a few more things about those P3 payments. The first one we already discussed. The payments only start after reaching substantial completion. We refer to that as occupancy readiness. It's the same thing. Once the building is completed, there will be payments. Before that, there will not be any payments. And the payments will continue for a period of 30 years. And those payments will be paid for by the county. And as we just discussed, is that in our current model, we're using the state funding as a milestone payment to the P3 partner at substantial completion. So not before, but at substantial completion. So P3 payments cover both the capital cost and the O&M cost. And also, as we just discussed, the private financing and the risk profile. It's basically also an insurance premium, if you will. The payments are performance-based, so meaning that if the P3 developer delivers or is not meeting the standards, and certain rooms are not available or some other minimum conditions are not being met, there will be deductions. So meaning that the county is going to pay less if the performance is lower. And we know from experience that performance is typically high, but we should be expecting some deductions. The final point is actually a pretty important point, and that is that we have now developed our projected P3 payment cash flow. And that's, we are proposing for that cash flow to serve as a ceiling during the procurement, which means that bids that would come in that would exceed the ceiling will be deemed non-compliant. In other words, the P3 payment that we're projecting today is also a maximum, which is of course not the same under conventional delivery, because bidders under conventional delivery cannot commit to the whole life cycle cost, because that's not how the model works. So this is literally a ceiling. This is literally a maximum payment. We're locking in the life cycle cost of the project, not only at financial close, but even as early as the launch of the procurement. With that, maybe I want to ask Elizabeth, is there anything you want to add?
Good morning. Not at this time. I think that was really good, Marcel. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, it's time to open it up to commissioner questions. I have a couple. Relocation costs of the district attorney and the judges, who pays for that?
The state OJD will pay for the relocation of the judges, and the county will pay for the relocation of the district attorney.
And do we know how much that is? And if the state pays for the relocation of the judges, does that come out of the 50% match?
No, the 50% match is only for the capital construction of the building, of which it's the qualified capital cost. The
Okay.
state pays its own FF&E, furniture, fixture, and equipment expense for the judges, as well as the relocation.
So how many district attorneys do we have? ADAs and 30, okay? DAs 30. Now, what about equipment costs and desk costs? You're going to want all new desks and everything in there.
Yeah, our cost estimates include full FF&E for the entire project, so it includes both the OJD. And I might add that the move will be fairly easy comparatively speaking, because there's very little value of any of the assets remaining in the existing building. So
Right.
it'll basically be people and files that will be moving, but not a lot of furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
Well, no, we're not transferring that, but we have to buy new. And so you're telling me that the projected cost of the brand-new equipment is covered in P3. Now, what about, will the judges and the DAs be using their existing computer systems? What about wiring, internet, all of those soft costs? Is that included in the P3 model?
It's included in our cost model regardless of whether you go with a P3 or a non-P3. It's included in these cost projections, FF&E at 6.5% of hard costs.
Okay,
So that's
so
all inclusive.
when Commissioner Fisher asked the question about the buildings, the temporary buildings over there, and the relocation of those services and the people in that, you said that H3S would bear the cost of that relocation, correct?
Working with county administration.
So that's our cost.
But it's not part of the courthouse project
Correct,
cost.
but
It's our
that
cost.
is our cost.
Correct.
So I would need a cost on that as well. I would need a cost on the DA. How large of a parking lot is envisioned in this? Because parking lot construction can get expensive.
Yeah, we've already got preliminary surface parking concepts that Sarah Architect did for us, and the cost estimates are here in Steve Kelly's estimates, and it would be just south of this building here, across the way, that vacant space would become the new surface parking for the courthouse. The long-range plan at full build-out of this campus is for a 4-story parking garage to be over where TDS is located.
Yeah, I understand the 4-story, but, you know, we have to park somebody now in the new building. So let me see, let's orient myself right.
Yeah, and I can clarify-
So the courthouse is going to be over here, but we're going to park over here?
Courthouse is going to be over here, and it's going to take out some current
Yes.
DSB parking.
Yes.
But then new surface parking will be here, so,
Okay, when you say surface parking, that means paved parking.
yes.
And that means a whole host of things, like rain runoff, water detention systems, and your environmental aspects, and your drainage and all that. That stuff is expensive. Do we have a cost estimate on that?
Yeah, that's on that bottom line, below the line. And the
Yeah,
cost
but I
estimate.
saw gravel. I saw gravel written on there.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't think gravel is the proper term. This is the right cost
Yeah,
estimate.
because they're not going to let us get away with gravel, although it'd be really wonderful if we could.
And
Okay.
we've had, Oregon City's actually been involved in our courthouse technical advisory team since 2018,
Good.
the planning department. So they're well-versed. They know our master plan. They know our requirements. And they know what they're going to trigger is what does this courthouse occupancy trigger in terms of parking requirements. But we've been told that it's not the interim buildings that trigger the campus parking, it's full build-out. So there seems to be some flexibility of how much parking we need to provide regulatorily by Oregon City, or how much we want to provide for convenience and flow for the campus.
Well, true, because we have employees here, and I can see that, I mean, I don't know what kind of traffic this courthouse is going to have, but we need to take care of our own employees first to make sure that they have ample parking. It sounds like Gary is going to have the employees come back starting July 6th, I believe, was the memo that I read. And so we're going to possibly be looking at full employment. I don't know.
Yeah.
But also we have visitors and people who do business at both this building and the next building. Those spaces need to be available too. So I'm just
Yeah, we
throwing
have
some
the
of those
total
ideas.
space requirements at full build-out. We have it already identified in a table with the City of Oregon City. It'll be when we get into the land use permitting process, it'll dictate exactly what we need to do.
Thank you, Gary. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, if you'll all indulge me, I have a couple questions. So just want to go back to the 7-slide deck, with the financing availability payments. So I'm looking at slide, at the top corner in red, it says, the page numbers. So we can go to page 6. Put that back up on the screen, please. And then while that's happening, I just want to point out, I just did some looking on the internet, and Multnomah County's courthouse, with the land included, came out to $699 a square foot. And our numbers, when I crunch them, comes out to $854 per square foot, with no land cost included. So I'll try and do an apples for apples without land, but that $699 figure for Multnomah County would probably come down if you take the land cost out. That's my best guess.
Yeah, and we had our technical advisors actually do the comps and look at that, so that's what their report they're going to provide back to you.
Yep. So I just want to just put that out there. So this is higher. So we had that slide back, that slide 6 up yet? Nope.
Slide number 6, Paul. Oh, yes, okay.
It's this one, the bar graph one.
Yeah, got it.
There we go. Thank you. So this is awesome. I actually really like this. So if we look at the light blue, and you look at the light blue, which basically says the O&M cost, so that's the operation and maintenance of the building, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now do we all, are these numbers, Gary, staff, you feel good about these numbers?
Yeah, I do. I've seen the model that they've run. It's a very sophisticated financial model.
Okay. So I had sent Elizabeth earlier this morning a question. What validates, what data do we have to show the monetization of the gray on the very top, which is considered the risk, right? The expected county risk. So I'm just kind of curious, when you use the word expected county risk, what does that mean?
I think
Is that
Marcel.
just risk in general?
Marcel addressed that earlier, but Marcel, you want to restate what you said earlier about the expected risk?
Yeah. What I wanted to say is I wanted to be fancy and use a statistical term. So what I said is expected value. So what I wanted to say is it's not. So sometimes when people talk about risks, then they think, oh, okay, what's the worst that can happen, right? But that's not what this is. So this is the value of the risk. This is the expected value. And so that I wanted to use that term instead of, or to avoid creating the impression that this is the worst that can happen. This is after doing our analysis. And we went through a fairly detailed risk assessment exercise with 3 larger working sessions with a very broad representation with all the disciplines. We identified all the risks. We thought about how to mitigate those risks, and then we also valued and monetized the risk. And so we then expressed all of that in the, we translated that to the financial analysis. This is, of course, a very simplistic visualization, but we have a bigger report on that total risk assessment that goes into this.
Okay, so I just want to get the verbiage correct. So if we're not comfortable with the word expected county risk, is it better to say it's potential county risk? I'm looking for the right verbiage that defines what the gray area is, if we're not happy with the word expected county risk. Expected means that it'll happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's
It's
what,
not
that's what
expected or
Marcel's saying,
anticipated.
based on experience. I
But
think
is
that's what
it potential or expected?
No, then it's expected. So it's what we, based on experience across many projects, would expect the sort of, average is not the right word, but average cost overrun and negative events, like all kinds of things going wrong in a project, because in any investment project, things will go wrong, right? So water damage may happen, as another courthouse close by recently experienced. So there are risks, and those risks, some of those will materialize. We cannot exactly predict which one are going to materialize. There will most likely be cost overruns. We know from past public investment projects that there have been cost overruns, that there have been delays. And so based on that experience and based on what the market thinks about these risks, we came up with a monetization. And so in that sense, it's expected and not potential. I should also say expected as the overall monetization of the risks, potential because not all 100+ risks have to happen in order to create negative financial consequences in this order of magnitude.
Right, so, okay, well, thank you. So I just want to get that, put that slide back, please back up, just keep it up there. So clarification, so it's quite possible that none of that could be realized, or very little of that would actually be realized, right? So, I think that's what you said, but I just want to clarify that.
It'd be extraordinary not to realize it.
The entire amount.
And
No, sorry. I'm going to say it again. This is the expected value, is in the statistical term expected value. That also means that there's always a chance that it may be higher or much higher, or lower or much lower. That's always, however, this is the expected value.
Okay, so it could be much lower.
It could be.
It could be, okay.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back to my experience with this wastewater treatment plant rehabilitation project that was $100 million that we got down to $60 million. And I won't even talk about the cost savings of the financing, which was an additional tens of millions of dollars of savings. So our overruns on that project really turned out to be about, around 10% overrun. So that risk of the conventional, which was CMGC, by the way, put in that category, conventional delivery, really didn't amount to very much. But on this amount here, or this scale here, it's pretty significant. I mean, I'm just doing some rough math on that gray, and I came up with about 100, just a little bit north of $100 million in potential savings if you don't really realize that. That's what I come up with. So, because again, when we had the people, was it Howard County that came here before, and we talked with them?
Yeah.
And I asked them the question, so tell me about give me an example of the risk savings, and they basically talked about the maintenance. And so when I talked about the light blue there, the operations maintenance is already included in that. It's about the same in each of the models, the operations and maintenance. I would just say that under the conventional, that's a potential savings in the cost of the project, and that wouldn't necessarily happen at the full $105 million.
Yeah, it's only savings if you don't see the expected results.
Okay.
It could also be much greater if you see worse than expected results.
So conventional, delivery versus CMGC. CMGC's guaranteed maximum price, that actually caps, that limits that risk factor quite a bit under CMGC.
Yeah. If I may, I do agree that CMGC is actually, of course, and also design build would already transfer some of the risks to a contractor, and most likely the contractor would price that too, by the way. But what I wanted to also respond to is that I don't think that, like, the way we look at this is like long-term performance risk and operational risk are not already included in the light blue. They're not included. So the gray bar is about everything that could potentially be a cost overrun, an uncertainty, a risk that happens over the life of the project. And I have never seen a project in which zero goes wrong. There's zero cost overruns, zero delays, zero unexpected things, zero events that we did not expect, zero floods or any unexpected events. I don't think, I'm not aware of such project, but I do agree that if those were to happen, then it is possible that the county cost would actually be lower or much lower than what we're currently showing here. There's also a chance that they're higher or much higher than what we're showing here.
Okay, well, thank you. So let me just ask another question here. So what, under this projection here, what year would the courthouse be available to move into?
2025.
2025. So after 2020, because the greatest risk is during construction. And then so the risk should actually diminish over time, right? The greatest risk is actually building it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, okay.
So when I look at those gray bars, I'm really asking myself, geez, they're pretty flat across there, minus the construction years I can see there are a little bit higher, but not that much different. So that's where typically most of the risk is.
Yeah. Maybe two quick responses to this. One is I should admit that the way we show the risk is for simplicity's sake, we're showing it as a flat cash flow. We could have also shown it in a more bulky way, but we didn't feel like there was enough data to justify a more specific risk valuation profile. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I want to mention, and it came up before, is what happens the day after the end date of the agreement, right? Isn't the whole courthouse going to fall apart? No, because the P3 agreement is going to specify handback requirements. And actually, that also means that if now the P3 partner needs to hand back the courthouse according to those handback specifications, it could mean that they need to do some serious major maintenance a few years before the handback. So it is. So I think what we're trying to get at in the P3 agreement that we're developing is to avoid the risk that, to your point, that they will design and build a courthouse that is going to fall apart the day after the 30-year term after completion ends.
All right. And my last point about this slide, it's a great demonstration. I've been asking for this, and in an indirect way, this reveals it. If you look at the turquoise and the green, which is called the debt service, if you look at that, and you look at the delta between those, that's really, that really is the, just quite a bit, kind of speaks to the interest and the approach, the financing approach. So it's significantly higher. But I think what strikes me most of all is that the overall, the top of each of those bars are the same, virtually the same. I mean, the trend's a little bit different. It slopes off a little bit towards the end. But for the most part, the 15 million bar is about on par. So, really, there's nothing to gain on the P3 as far as any potential savings, but under conventional delivery, by the way this is displayed, there's a lot to save. There's more to save under this model than there would be under the P3, just by the way it's demonstrated. So my last question, Gary, is this, is that regardless, if we do a P3, if we do the P3, we're still going to hire and have staff overseeing the project, right? I mean, we're not going to just turn a blind eye and just wait for 2025 to come along. We're going to have our own engineers and managers and construction managers making sure that everything's done right to some degree.
We'll have an owner's rep, project
Yeah,
manager.
right, right, owner's rep. So can you just rough cost of what that would be the county would incur? The staffing level for that, consultants, inside and outside cost?
We've got we've got a scope of work projection from WT for that kind of role. Tom, do you want to address that?
Would that be independent? It would be our own, right? We're going to hire it independently, right?
Well, I think
It would be
I
eligible
think it's
for the shared
assumed, I
cost.
think it's assumed going forward, there's going to be a project manager, and whether that can be absorbed through some future hires, Paul, I'm not sure it's going to be a hard cost for us. It could be a soft cost going
Well,
forward.
it'll be a soft cost. Yeah, it'll definitely be a soft cost. My question is how much will that be?
Yeah, it'll be a shared cost. The state will pay because it's part of the capital construction. It'll be capitalized cost. And Tom Ness, are you there?
Yeah, can you see me? I can't see myself. Okay, sure. We projected to be there. Obviously, WT would be there through commercial and financial close of the project, but also we put in a budget to lead the design review process, obviously working with the county, so that's been priced, as well as overseeing assisting you in overseeing the construction phase up until the final completion of the building. And what we've done, we recently finished a project at the University of California, Merced, where we implemented about 1 million square feet of facilities. They essentially doubled the size of their campus. And we were there to kind of work to ensure that the standards were being met during the construction and all the milestones were met. Everything was accounted for. It was done in 3 phases. We were also there to assist with any performance deductions or penalties that occurred over the course of the construction or implementation of the buildings. But we also, will train, obviously, county staff to oversee the contract in the years to come, or certainly provide a support role in any way that we can. I believe during the construction period itself, Gary, I believe I submitted about $3 million over that long-term construction phase.
The 3-year phase.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but, absolutely, WT's been, would be prepared to assist the county during that process, and to the extent that there would be any involvement over the course of the term, absolutely.
And Paul, we have another commissioner too, so we need to move this along. Go ahead, Paul, finish
I was going to say, I just want to get a rough idea with that, having that independent representation for the project during the construction period, not afterwards. Once we're moved in, it doesn't really matter at that point. We maintain this building, we maintain that building, we know how to maintain buildings. So I'm just after that, during that construction phase, what that oversight cost would be.
Thank you. I think you asked really good questions, Paul. Although your comparison to the wastewater treatment plant, I do consider that maybe apples to oranges, and this is a little bit different on that. For instance, I would think on your wastewater treatment plant, you would not have a 35% grossing factor because you don't need hallways and elevators, but just saying. Commissioner Scholl, you're up next.
Yes, under the P3 delivery model, how are payment deductions determined in the case of underperformance of the P3 partner? And is property insurance included in O&M costs with P3 delivery?
Good question.
Marcel, do you want to take that one?
Yes. I'd also like to take the opportunity to reiterate the point that in the cash flows that we're showing, we're representing all costs, right? So we're considering contract management cost, all costs. So we try to do as much as possible an apples to oranges comparison. So to Commissioner Savis's point, are contract management costs included? Yes, they are included, and we will get back to you with the information on that. How are deductions being determined? So we just finished the appendix to the project agreement that specifies the payment mechanism. And the payment mechanism lays out what the, let's say, performance indicators are and what the consequences are for not meeting those performance indicators. So basically this appendix describes in great detail the various key minimum requirements and also how those minimum requirements in the case of underperformance will lead to deductions, but also how much time the P3 partner will have to address, to rectify any non-compliance issues. So there is a section in the agreement that specifies how those deductions work. And by the way, that section is based on recent precedents that work well.
We've had 3 meetings with payment structure groups, very detailed page-by-page turn of all these components, and also Jose's team there at WT prioritized every space in the new facility for importance that feeds into that payment mechanism. So the more important the space, the bigger the deduction for unavailability.
Okay.
And on insurance and O&M costs?
Insurance,
Insurance is in.
it's included in the,
Included.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So I may need to get back to you on this. In the project agreement, we will be prescribing some insurances that we require the P3 partner to take out and to also include the county on as additional insured. I need to get back to you on.
okay, thank you, Marcel. Thank you, Marcel. It's at 11:25. Gary, I would like to move on to budget implications.
Please.
Okay, good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. I first want to say I am excited that your direction and County Administrator Gary's direction for the courthouse is coming now. I know this has been a long time coming because the Finance Department has been undergoing major changes, which are going to provide really, and are in fact today even providing very good tools. So I think the timing is perfect. We are being able to look at our financials accurately, timely, and they're transparent. The effort that we are doing with our performance metrics, really identifying each of our programs that the county has, looking at what the county is really doing in services, and then just our outcomes-based budgeting. All this is coming together very nicely, and so I'm excited for the future of these decisions and direction from the commissioners. So a lot of the discussion that we've been having this morning is about, what is the cost? Sometimes we take, how much money do we have, and then what can we afford to build? In this respect, we know we need a courthouse, and we know what those needs are included as WT shared. And so we've had to approach this kind of in reverse that you would think normally. And I want to recognize that because that's not best practices as, from a finance person coming in. But we've had to do that, and I think our decisions going forward are going to be based on what we're looking at with our financials for the county. So I have the forecast here, but I also want to look at any of the documents that I've submitted also to wrap up any questions about pros and cons of the P3 versus conventional. But I just wanted to set up my time talking about the budget, that I think this is really an opportunity for the county to move forward.
Okay, so we don't make payments until 2025, and there is a gap between the year 2025 and 2029 where we will be carrying a double debt. And in the year 2029 to 2030, the existing county debt will be paid off, which will free up some of the general fund money. Correct, Gary Schmidt?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so what I think our challenge is, Commissioners, is we need to look at the budget going through from the years 2025 to 2029. We have time to figure out what we are going to do with our existing costs, our departments, our program development, and any new shiny toys that Commissioners might be tempted to buy, because that's exactly what it's going to take. We have a decision to make. We can build a building. We can set aside money in our current budget to do that. We can set aside maintenance for our existing buildings and take care of what we own. Or we can continually to be tempted by every person that walks in the room, oh, I need this program because woe is me and woe is me. That's a decision we can make, and I'm not saying that isn't vital. I'm not saying that isn't important. But I will say this to Commissioners. You can't afford to do everything all the time, all at once. We are not reaching a decision point today, but we can reach a decision point on May 4th. Is that right, Gary Schmidt?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. In order to make that decision point on May 4th, we need to come prepared. And we need to look at the budget and understand that. Now, I do have one concern here about the projected library buildings. And Elizabeth Comfort, you have $500,000 a year. Now, is that payments on a debt?
That is correct. We'll be looking at taking out bond next spring for the Gladstone and Oak Grove libraries, and the county has a portion of that debt that they'll be responsible for, and it's approximately $8 million. The final estimates are not complete yet for that.
But our portion would be $500,000. Are you comfortable in saying that at this point?
That is our best estimate at this time.
Is that high, low, medium? Don't know. What about cost overruns on those two libraries that we could be subject to, which would increase our $500,000 maybe to $600,000 or $700,000? And by the way, the reason why we're doing that is because I believe we lost a court case. Is that right?
Correct. And once we have the design, then we'll have more information on the financial impact.
Okay, so that's my other consideration. Now, in this budget, how much money a year has been set aside for maintenance on our current buildings?
We have not established that plan yet, and that's why I'm excited about our future with our financials, is because we will be setting aside reserves going forward. This year, in the 21-22 budget, we've started with a $2 million facility operations maintenance reserve.
So, in order for me to be comfortable with this, I need a hard number on what the current maintenance for this building, that building, all the buildings that we're responsible for. I need a hard number. I need a set-aside number every year in the budget, in reserves, or however you classify that, for the maintenance on these buildings. Because we can't be building a new building and let these buildings deteriorate because we can't afford it.
And Chair, that's an exercise we're doing right now with facilities, is what is the best practice maintenance for all of our county-owned buildings and leased compared to what we are doing now, and what is that gap? Because it has been a gap based on financial availability and staff time.
Well,
So
are we going to
we're-
have that by May 4th? Gary Schmidt, we need that by May 4th.
Yes, you'll have it by May 4th.
Okay, we need that by May 4th. I was hoping we'd have it today, so we had good financial information moving forward.
So if I may, Elizabeth, we have what's called the 420 Capital Construction Fund. Doesn't that also include maintenance for current buildings?
we do have maintenance currently.
How much is
Budgeted.
that? Because we have maintenance when something breaks, and then we go out and scramble around to try to find the money to fix it. I'm not talking about that type of maintenance. I'm talking about reserves set aside, that we do replacement items before they break. You know, if our HVAC system has a 20-year life on it, it's probably going to have to be replaced before it breaks. That's what I'm talking about, right? Yep. Commissioner Savas, you're in the queue.
Yeah, well, so on the payments and the maintenance, direct you back to this slide, Chair, if you take a look at, you look at this slide again, it has the O&M in here.
I'm not talking about the new building, Paul. I'm talking about our existing buildings because I want an overall picture of our financial health before we think we can go forward and enter, and I understand what you're saying on that.
Right, yeah, my point is this, is that getting back to the financing piece, if you look at the green bars on this again, and look at the payments. So this, getting back to finance, the payments are about $8 million under the P3, pretty flat, and the payments under the conventional are closer to $5 million, $6 million. So I want to point that out, that's $2 million a year. The maintenance costs are embedded in there and relatively the same. So, you know, the upside is we could actually save about potentially $2 million, when the delta being, the fuzzy part being whatever overruns or risk, the gray piece is there. But if you look at the net total, it's pretty flat. It's relatively the same. So the worst case is we break even, so to speak. I won't say worst case, but as is drawn out there. So I've never been wedded to any one of these project delivery systems or conventional or whatever. I'm not wedded to any of them, but I want to look at everything objectively. And the prior board obviously favored the P3, and so we're here today under this P3 look at. But I have been really open-minded about this, and I just want to look at and wanting the numbers. And I think this is probably the most valuable. This is really displays and answers a lot of the questions I've been asking all along.
I'm very happy with that. Also, another factor we haven't considered is the current maintenance cost of the existing courthouse, which I understand. You know, Judge, don't shake your head at me, please. There's got to be some costs there that can be transferred. Thank you very much. Commissioner Schrader, you have a comment?
Yeah, so we're not going to make a decision today whether
We are not
do.
making a decision. I'm trying just to get at some hard financial data.
Okay, so, but, yeah, okay, I understand that. So we're not even going to make a decision today if we're going to move ahead at all, right?
No, but we do have a session coming up May
Okay,
4th.
great. Because what I'm going through in my own head is that if we do a conventional delivery system, our fiscal discipline, as I said, I foresee that we would probably have to be cutting programs. I mean, and we're going to have to exercise extreme fiscal discipline. So that's the trade-off that we're going to be talking about. The P3 seems to buy us time. Frankly, what I like about the P3 is I don't want to have a Wapato either, because that was built and there was no O&M money. That's pretty significant. And for me, transferring the risk of the O&M might be worth looking at, because
Well,
our
that's true.
facilities costs aren't going to go down.
No.
As they, you know, so what we're trying to maintain now versus kind of taking this off our plate. So those are the kinds of questions I'm trying to weigh in my mind. And I'm glad we're not making a decision, because I'd like to sit with Elizabeth the way you have done, Chair, and go through this. So
And I would encourage the commissioners just to really roll up your sleeves and get to know this inside and out. And Gary, I am concerned about the contingency. Any project has cost overruns, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around the fact that the P3 is going to try to eliminate or minimize that, correct?
Correct.
To me, that's the beauty of the P3, also the delayed payment situation, also the O&M over time. And I also like the management structure, the project management structure on this. We'll probably have a dedicated staff person or somebody working on it, but it takes out, I think, a lot of emotion as we go forward. And I've built a lot of things, okay? And you have to be very careful that you do not invest, your heart and soul in it. You really have to take a 30,000 view of the financials going through. And for instance, you lay the foundation, and then you do not change the floor plan. Okay? And so when they talk about risks in here, that's one of the risks. Okay, we don't like this. The only one thing I have a little angst about is the 35% grossing factor. That, to me, that goes to the design of the building. It may be ADA compliance. I understand what that means. I have angst over the 35% grossing factor because I think it's taken away courtroom space, office space, jury space, all that stuff that you need. I have some angst with that, and so I would like them to get back to me on that area. Christina, I see a red light on. Commissioner Fisher, you're up.
Yeah, just a few comments. Early on in the presentation, we saw the sort of where the courtrooms were and how the layout was going to be. And I just want to compliment the concepts in there, because there is built into this attorney-client conference rooms. And I can tell you that is really, really important, because right now in the courthouse in Clackamas County, when an attorney is talking to a client, they really have to do it in the hallway where other people can overhear what's going on there. And
I've heard that before,
and it's
too.
really uncomfortable. So I think that the outreach that happened to come up with these elements is really spot on, and I really appreciate seeing these materials. The other piece, Chair Smith, I love your questions, because when I was talking with Gary, and I've been really rolling up my sleeves with Gary Barth, and thank you, Gary, for spending the time with me. Because I had those, well, what are our maintenance and operations costs right now with the courthouse? And they're over $1 million on that courthouse right now. And we aren't, the investment in that courthouse, it's a really, it needs a lot of work. So.
Not just the courthouse, there's four buildings down there that are all serving
Yes,
DA and
yes.
court functions, so it's all those combined.
Yeah, so the opportunity to really get a handle on things, analyze it, streamline it, is a really, really welcome opportunity. The other piece that we haven't really talked about with the P3, we sort of talked around it, but the idea that there is competition here to come up with the best product, that is good. That is what really America is based on, is the competitive factor, and the best quality is the one that succeeds. And I really like that in having us pursue this. The other piece about the P3 is, yeah, we are really great in Clackamas County at a lot of things, and I am fully proud of that. But are we really the experts on a courthouse?
No.
I think having the public-private partnership, and having the private entity who has done this, who's studied it, who can really oversee and do that and shift that risk from us is, I don't know if we can put a value on that, but it might be an intangible value, or maybe it can be quantified.
I tried to put the value, it's in that slide that we've been
Well,
referring
it's
to.
in the
Yeah.
slide of the risk, but there's also the, what are we good at? And focusing where we're good is incredibly valuable, and getting help where we need it outside is also really valuable. The other piece I really want to encourage my fellow commissioners to look at is the timing of when the different debt is going to be paid off. And Elizabeth, thank you for all your work. We have a balloon payment for the light rail that's coming up, and that has been planned for. When we first started this conversation years ago, it was like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. How can we ever get to the place where we can build a courthouse? It just seems so overwhelming, because it just didn't seem possible. But with good financial planning, we are so much closer, and with the creativity of Gary and staff looking at a public-private partnership, which gives us the time in order to really plan. And Chair Smith, I applaud you saying, commissioners, and this isn't just for this commission, but this is for future commissions, you cannot, every shiny object. It's like, no, we have got to practice discipline. And that's this, right here, is our discipline, and we have got to stick to this so that we move forward, but strategically and not, and fiscally responsibly. So that's my Cal Courthouse speech for the day. I'll have another one on May 4th.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. I appreciate that. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, Gary, there's examples across this country where this P3 has been implemented, correct?
Correct. Howard County was our first model that we kind of looked to. Miami-Dade is the most recent one. They broke ground a few months ago. Abbotsford, British Columbia just completed a P3 courthouse, a very similar size with a 4-story parking structure.
Is there any way we can get the contacts of those folks? I do know Sally from Miami-Dade, who's head of the large urban county caucus. Like, so as an example, that's somebody I could call up and I could actually say, hey.
Yeah, and we actually had a conference call, if you might recall, with the
Right.
Howard County folks.
With Howard
and
County, yeah.
yourself. Yeah.
But it might be nice to, yeah, don't ask me what I recall. That's, depends on the day and time, Gary, sorry. But, yeah, I'd like to get more of that, and maybe, I'd like to connect with some of the other commissioners across.
So I know our consultant team, I also went,
Martha,
All right.
I would love to have you do that.
Well, Sally Hayman's they do good work in Miami-Dade, I can tell you that, and that's a huge county with a lot of
Gary,
complexity.
which projects came in under budget? Did you mention one to me?
the most recent one, Miami-Dade, I think, and Marcel can probably validate this, I think they came in about 35% under what they had projected when they got through the procurement process.
Well, you know, I would sure like Christmas to come early for us.
I know.
To do that. Now, let's say, I don't know what this board wants to do, let's say we approve the P3 and go forward. Then we would need to convince the powers that be in Salem to accept the P3 model because they want to allocate funds differently than what this P3 model allows for, correct, Gary?
Correct. And we have a
So-
team working on that diligently. In fact, our next meeting is at 1 o'clock this afternoon.
Okay. Good luck with that, and if anybody in the room, in the back, can lend your very considerable influence in that, get the weights out and start stiff-arming them.
If I may, just very quickly, just for the board's edification, is currently the structure is set up where the county gets the construction funds through a bond issuance or reserves or whatever, puts it on deposit with the state, then withdraws it to pay the contractors, the architects, and then requests reimbursement for 50% of that. So it's a very elaborate accounting structure. Our analysis shows that it's not legislative required, it's more of a procedural step. And they're doing that to ensure that the OCCCIF funds goes towards its intended purpose and that the local jurisdiction has skin in the game and is putting their money in.
I understand why they do that. They don't want, funds being pilfered for here and there and used for something else.
So on a
but-
P3, what we've told them is, you don't have to pay any money until the building's complete, and then you can make one payment for the milestone payment, and you've got the completed building that you'll be touring after the ribbon cutting, so that what better assurance is there that your money went to the right process? So they seem very receptive to that. We're just working through the mechanics of that.
Thank you, Gary. Paul Savas?
Yeah, I just want to just leave you with one thing to ponder between now and May 4th. It's a $200 million project, and you have a choice of adding another $100 million of cost under the P3 scenario versus the conventional scenario. So,
I'm not sure that's true, Commissioner Savas. I would like somebody to
Chair,
verify
if I
those
could
statements.
if I could just
really
finish my thoughts. If you look at the numbers, that's what you'll discover.
Yeah, but we
And
have
if you
interest.
look at the bar graph, you'll discover that as well. So,
Paul-
so
Paul-
it's like buying a car, you can buy the extended warranty, or you cannot, but obviously this is more severe, the cost delta is more severe than that. $100 million would make this really a $300 million choice versus a $200 million choice, essentially.
Well, we have interest payments over time. Of course, it increase your costs. If we could pay cash, we would get it for a lot less, but we're going to be paying interest over the time. We have also decided that, and I've heard you say this, Commissioner Savas, but at the end of this project, of the 30-year financing, we want a building that's in good shape that will last the test of time. So you say on one hand, you want to build a building that's going to last the test of time. Well, that is going to cost money in your maintenance and operations to make sure that the systems are in good working order, and the decision of the type of construction, design, and materials that we use. If we're going to build a building that's going to last for 50 years, yes, then that's going to cost over time on the P3, on anything that we do. I'm not convinced that the conventional way to build it, we're going to save any money. There's not a person in this county government who's qualified, in my opinion, to build a courthouse. And that's why the commission has put somebody like Gary Barth in charge, who's done an exorbitant amount of research and has shared everything he can possibly can. He's gone nationally and with many, many firms. And I think the only thing that we can do, commissioners, is number one, make a decision. Are we going to have a courthouse or not? Number two, can we afford it? And number three, which mechanism are we going to use? So those are three questions I would like you to ponder and discuss between whomever. And as we go forward, I want to thank everybody for attending today. We have a luncheon to attend to, and Gary Barth, thank you for getting us out early.
You're welcome, Madam
And this
Chair.
meeting is adjourned.